Alright, here's another exercise. In this exercise, I want you to create this function, getMax. We give it an array and it returns the largest number in that array. So if we give it this array of numbers, it returns 4. If we give it an empty array, it returns undefined because we don't have anything in this array. So we cannot return 0 or a negative number because none of these values exist in this array. So go ahead, do this exercise. Start with a simple implementation. Once that implementation is working, then to challenge yourself, implement this function using the reduce method in arrays. You will see my solution next. All right, so let's start with the simplest implementation. First, we want to check to see if this array is empty or not. If it's empty, we're going to return undefined. So if array.length equals 0, you're going to return undefined. Also note that by convention, sometimes if you have an if statement with only one line after, some developers prefer to put that line right next to the if statement. Some developers format it like this. It's more of a personal preference. There's really no right or wrong. So I'm going to put this on the same line. Now, otherwise, we have at least one element in this array. So I'm going to declare a variable, call it max, and set it to the first element in this array. So we want to assume that the first element is the largest number. Next, we will iterate this array. And if we find a number that is larger, then we're going to reset this max variable. So let's do a for loop. Let we start from the second element in this array and run this loop as long as I is less than the length of the array. Then we increment I. Now we need to check to see if the current number is larger than max. So if array of I is greater than max, then we're going to set max to this current value. Okay. Finally, after this loop, we want to return max. So that's the simplest implementation. If we run this code and pass an empty array here, we get undefined, beautiful. If we pass an array with only one number, we get that number. If we add 2 numbers here, 2 is the largest number. Let's add a few more values here. Now we should get 3, beautiful. So our basic implementation is working. Now let's re-implement this method using the reduce method. So we want to keep the first line as is. So if we don't have anything in this array, we want to return undefined. Otherwise, let me comment out this code so we can compare them side by side. So we use array.reduce. We pass an arrow function with 2 parameters, accumulator and current. And that goes to this code block here. So you know that if we don't pass an initial value for the accumulator, by default, it will be set to the first element in the array. That is exactly like what we have on line 11. So in the body of this arrow function, we want to check to see if the current value is greater than what we have in accumulator, exactly like what we have here. If it is, then we want to return the current value. Otherwise, we want to return accumulator. So we can write code like this. If current is greater than accumulator, we want to return current. Otherwise, we'll return accumulator. Now we can rewrite this using the conditional operator. So let me expand this. So instead of these 2 lines, we can do something like this. Return, we add our condition, which is current greater than accumulator. If that's the case, we want to return current. Otherwise, we return accumulator. That is cleaner, right? Now we can make this code even cleaner by renaming these 2 parameters to something like A and B. So basically, we're reducing this array. We get 2 elements at a time. If B is greater than A, we're going to return B. Otherwise, we're going to return A. Actually, I personally prefer to change the order of this operand. So I would like to say if A is greater than B, then I want to return A, otherwise I want to return B. That is very easy to understand. Also, because we have a single line of code here, we're simply returning a value. We can get rid of the return keyword as well as the curly braces, bring everything on one line. And here's the end result. So basically you can see this line of code is equivalent to all these lines here. That is the beauty of the reduce method. So this is what I want you to take away from this exercise. Anytime you have an array of values and you want to get a single value as a result of iterating that array, think of the reduce method. In this case, we're finding the largest value in this array. So we're reducing this array into a single value. All right, and finally, we need to return whatever we're getting from the reduce method. Now, let's test this and make sure everything is working. So I'm going to save the changes. We still get 3. If I pass an empty array, we get undefined. Beautiful.